We're back with this week's Line Opinion panelists. This week, a special prosecutor in Albuquerque announced new charges against two officers for the shooting death of James Boyd in the foothills of Albuquerque last year. Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez were originally charged with first-degree murder by Bernalillo County District Attorney Kerry Brandenburg, but Ms. Brandenburg was removed from that case, as you know, and a special prosecutor, Randy McGinn, reviewed the case and announced that the officers will be charged with second-degree murder and other assorted charges. And Laura, you know, we've talked about the shootings at the table many times, but let's get some understanding here. What's the difference between first-degree murder and second-degrgy murder? Why the difference in the charges?
Right. First-degree murder has to have some form of premeditation. Mm-hmm. So first-degree murder has to, you essentially, the perpetrator, the suspect, has to plan the shooting. Mm-hmm. So they have to have had some form of planning that went into it. In this case, what I think has been determined from the facts is that there wasn't, premeditation. It's not like they went there with the intent to kill him. Mm-hmm. That would be a clear sign of first-degree murder. The issue, I think, is a little more confusing in this situation because you can form premeditation. There isn't sort of a time frame like it had to be the day before or a week before that you were planning. It could be as small as just right before the incident that you plan to do it. So I think that's where it got a little bit confusing.
Yeah.
But I think there just wasn't enough evidence to be able to show.
This was back when folks are hung up on the recording.
Right.
The officer threatened he was going to shoot the guy in a
right.
difficult
but even
place
in that situation,
yeah.
I mean, there's differences in the law in terms of if somebody is essentially caught up in the heat of the moment.
Gotcha.
That is generally not premeditation. It tends to be more manslaughter depending on the circumstances. So I think in this case, we have to be realistic about what the prosecution thought they could bring. If they didn't have enough evidence for first degree, they don't want to gamble to do first degree or nothing.
Gotcha.
They'd rather find something that's more reasonable that they can actually prosecute and it passes the smell test, and they found second degree murder. And I think for a lot of people, the headline was they're not going to get charged with first degree murder. That doesn't mean that they're not going to see time for this if they do get convicted. I mean, it's still a serious charge, and they still are going to have to go through a full trial.
But it does not hold the possibility of life as a sentence without that first-degree murder of Marisa DeMarco. And so what's interesting about Randy McGinn's approach here, because I remember at the time we talked about it at the table, that folks, if they're not going to get Ms. Brandenburg, you're not going to necessarily get a break with Ms. McGinn either. She's been around the horn here and knows how to prosecute a case. Where do you think this puts the officers now? What's their line of defense now with this kind of a charge versus first-degree murder?
In reading about it, their attorney was saying that they need to prove that they were within the rights of the law to take the action that they took. And Randy McGinn is saying that it doesn't count as self-defense if you started the fight. That's kind of her line. So I think those are the arguments that we're going to see play out in the court. The next thing for this case is that it goes up for a hearing before a judge who also was formerly a police officer. I noted too in the story about this. Interesting.
Tom, your thought on this? And as these things go along, there's all the suppositions about what's going to happen. We need a trial, actually, to get some answers here. But in the world of PR, what happens with a second-degree charge versus first-degree? Do people take it less seriously, a second-degree charge, in your view?
A couple of things. I think people, they go, oh, well, it's not first-degree, so second-degree. But a lot of people don't have the insight that Laura just shared either. And so it's, a difference between, a realtor or a real estate agent.
Right.
Just to show the difference in language. But what I thought was interesting from a public relations perspective, since you asked, was how the defense appeared to be doing verbal high fives that it's not first-degree murder. Well, you know what? It's still murder.
Right.
Is what they're charged with. It's second degree, and granted, a lot of folks don't know what that is, but it's still a pretty grave offense. When you look at it, and so I think that the defense probably would have been better served had they just acknowledged it, say, you know what, we believe that this is really a good thing for our clients, and we'll continue to fight the facts of the case in court. Instead, I think they went over the top in celebrating and saying, "Oh, it's not first degree."
That's right. Dan, your thought on this?
Yeah, I just think that it's a shame that we're even having this conversation, that this is dealing with police officers. There seems to be a systemic problem. I think the fact that, I guess maybe the celebration stems from now there's no chance they're going to spend all their life in jail. They may spend the next 40 years in jail, but
15. I think it goes up to 15.
Is it up to 15
Sounds right.
max?
Yeah.
So that, that's better than spending life in jail.
Sure.
I think though that with the way this case has played out in the media leading up to it, with everything that's gone on in the country, I wouldn't be high-fiving if I was those police officers officers. I'm not sure that this is going to fare well for them, because I think there's a lot of frustration in this community that this may be the focal point of where that frustration can be released. So I would not be celebrating being in front of a jury as a police officer anytime soon.
I want to swing back to you, Laura Sanchez, on some of the charges. There are additional charges on top of this, which is very interesting to me, not just second-degree murder charges, but we've also got Mr. Sandy with aggravated battery and Mr. Perez with aggravated assault, and we have weapons add-ons as well. Parse that out a little bit for us. What does that all mean?
Well, in any case, you know, when they bring charges, they have multiple charges multiple crimes essentially that they're charging them with.
Yeah.
It basically means that they, you know, in the context of what occurred, there was also the, you know, lesser charges that were part of the overall incident. What those lesser charges mean is, you know, we're all talking about a trial, and of course a trial I think is important from the public perspective. They want to know, you know, what the outcome will be. They want to see justice. But the reality is that a case like this is very costly. It's very time consuming. It's also a gamble for both the prosecution and the defense. So there's a lot of room to negotiate a potential plea bargain. And those additional charges are often added, not that they're not real, but they're added as an opportunity to be able to negotiate some sort of a plea bargain. So you negotiate out, you sort of plead out on certain charges, and that really whittles down the case so that you're just looking at the facts before a judge and a jury. So it's not this extended, protracted thing where you're having to uncover a lot of things from the box. So in this case, there were some weapons charges, and again, part of it hinges on, you know, did they do it in the context of their work? Were they actually, you know, acting as agents of the state in their official capacity, or were they outside that line?
Gotcha.
And once you're outside that line, then those other charges, I think, stick,
Right.
or stick a little bit more because there's weapons charges, assaults.
Well, that's interesting, staying with you on the weapons charge, because it would strike a lot of people as somewhat absurd to have these charges come up against police officers. That's what you usually hear when you're talking about bad guys with
Right.
weapons and such. In the public's view, that's an interesting thing, isn't it?
It is. I mean, you know, to the layperson, obviously, it does sound absurd. But again, we're talking about, you know, you have to, for those other charges to stick, you have to assume that they were acting outside of their official capacity. So they acted as individuals. They were outside of what they were supposed to be doing. Without that actually being proven, the other charges won't be able to hold, because they, in their official capacity, they're allowed, obviously, to carry weapons and act in that way.
Gene, remember, shooting someone in cold blood is a bad guy. It doesn't matter whether you're hiding behind a badge or not. Shooting a person in cold blood, you're a bad guy.
Good point. Yeah, exactly. Marisa, you know, there's a lot at stake here for the DA's office, certainly, to have a successful outcome. The stakes are very, very high, it seems to me. What do you think about that?
I'm interested in some of what Laura was saying
Yeah.
about if there is a lot of pleading and pleading out on the case, if there will be much of a trial.
That's right.
And then if there's not, if people feel really dissatisfied
Sure.
with that.
Sure.
Also, so that's, I mean, because I think a lot of people in Albuquerque have a real stake in this case and really care about seeing some things come to light.
Sure. Let's cast ahead a little bit, and maybe there is some pleading out that happens in this world. We just had a tragedy with an officer killed in Rio Rancho by somebody who basically pled out of a lot of charges. Would the public accept that at this point? It would seem to me that if you went in front of a jury and there was a pleading out possibility, I just get the feeling people would get sort of icky about that and just want to see some justice here.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't actually thought about that. But, you know, if there's a plea agreement, you know, plea agreements happen all the time.
Sure.
I think that it would impact, it wouldn't favorably impact anyone except the officers in the case, perhaps. Because, you know, the police department would not look good as a result of a plea agreement that they didn't want their laundry aired.
That's right.
No transparency is what that message would say. And from the district attorney's perspective, the great experiment of having a special prosecutor come in would then be dissolved because, you know, anybody could have pled this. At least that would be the perception.
Sure.
I wonder what the time frame is going to be. You know, I wonder, Laura may know better, but I wonder, is this something we're going to see come to fruition in the next 6 to 8 months, or is this something we're talking about 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, that going through the process? And don't forget, there's really going to be 2 bites of the apple. There's going to be this criminal case, and then I'm sure there's going to be the civil case that comes behind it from the family. So, you know, I don't think the public's going to be denied that hearing, because I think regardless of what happens on the plea deal, the civil case on the heels of that, you're going to get all the same testimony, all the same things they're trying to prove. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how the time frame of this. Is this 2, 3 years down the road? Is this 6, 8 weeks, 6 months down the road?
And that's really hard. That's really hard to pinpoint because, you know, even if the court court, which is already overextended. They always are.
Because they
You
need
know,
more furniture.
Stop it, because they need more funding in general. But in any event, they have a docket, but the attorneys that are working the case could file extensions at various stages procedurally. So that could really extend.
And you got a
overall.
special prosecutor who's got another schedule that's got to
Right.
coordinate. It's not someone that's just sitting right here in the course of the normal job. This is a
So
special
all
prosecutor.
that complicates it, but I understand. I understand the feeling about the public wanting to see a trial and all of that. But I think oftentimes we live in a Law and Order or CNN 24-hour news cycle kind of world, and people get caught up in the drama of the trial versus what the justice system was intended to do, which is carrying out justice could mean resolving this and making sure that they serve their
carry a gun-
punishment.
and never carry a gun
That may
again.
be they've already been fired from their jobs, so they're not in that position anymore. Carrying out justice means making sure that they fulfill their duty, their punishment, and that can be very efficiently accomplished through a plea agreement.
Right.
And I think that people need to realize that these are people's livelihoods, it's their lives that are
Sure.
going to be impacted. Obviously it was James Boyd's life also. Ultimately the trial of it is really it's very dramatic, and it doesn't always come out leaving anybody
right.
feeling better or being able to heal from something that was so
That's a good
dramatic.
point. I'm glad
so
you got that in.
traumatic.
That does happen for sure. Now, up next, we talk about the condition of roads here in rural New Mexico.